everyone, and welcome to the Podcast by ARMY podcast, where we talk about BTS, ARMY, fandom, and research. We are your co-hosts, Dr. Kate Ringland and
Jhertau Her, a university researcher. And today, we're talking about multis, but not just multis in the K-pop context. We're talking about multi-fandom. We're talking about fandom culture. Because fandom exists beyond just BTS ARMY.
What? Does it?
I know. It's almost like I've been in fandom for 10 plus years now. Don't say that. I am old. I've had fandom experiences that aren't in ARMY, and that informs a lot of what I do in the fandom.
Weird.
It's almost like everywhere I go, I literally have to send Kate things constantly because she doesn't understand what I'm talking about.
This is true. This is true. How do I explain my fandom experience? This is an excellent question.
Music fandoms.
Okay, let me put it this way. I have been in fandoms my whole life, but I never realized I was in fandoms until I was in ARMY.
Yeah, so for you, it's a little more not having the actual articulation of the fandom and the culture. But for me, oh my God. My very first fandom, I think it's either Percy Jackson or My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. And then that is where all the exposure to all the different things came in. All like the transformative works, like the fan fiction, the fan art, and the actual fan organizing and everything, like that all just came together. Like conventions. When I was a kid, I wanted to go to BronyCon so bad. Actually, it was not a family-friendly space though. Technically it was, but I don't think my parents would ever allow me to go, which goes to say a lot because I have never gone. Anyway, living my best life. But yeah, fandom exists out of ARMY, and we should talk about it because a lot of times ARMY thinks things that happen in ARMY are unique to ARMY or are only ARMY, when really the world is vast and large, and there's a lot of different online communities doing a lot of different things, right? ARMY often gets touted as this large global international fandoms, but there's large global international fandoms everywhere. We could argumentatively say League of Legends is a large...
Oh. That was a choice. You reached and did not come back with what I thought you were going to come back with. Okay.
I reached really far with that one. But yeah, League of Legends, they write fan fiction. They draw fan art.
Wow.
They engage in a lot of fan organizing.
Interesting.
So they are a large international fandom. There are large international fandoms everywhere, really. They may not like be as motivated to organize as BTS ARMY is, but they still exist very much. And with that as well, we have to say this. Hot take, everyone. But maybe not that hot of a take. All fandom is the same.
Yes.
Indeed. Every single fandom experiences a lot of the same stress points. They experience a lot of the same cycles of information sharing, and just a lot of social things that happen are like the same across fandoms. All fandoms have different groups of people that are infighting constantly. And a lot of fandoms that manifests itself as ships, right? There are some fandoms, take for example, the My Hero Academia fandom. The My Hero Academia fandom very much is separated into the non-shipping sphere and the shipping sphere. Okay, it's so separated, in fact, that on Reddit, there's actually a subreddit for My Hero Academia. And then there's a subreddit for all the shipping stuff in My Hero Academia. It's separated, but then those two spheres of the fandom are still very large, and they have their own infighting and culture, even though they are subgroups of the same fandom. And there's overlap as well, but still they are separated in some aspects. BTS ARMY likes to live in its like, I'm not like other girls mentality. But we're going to break that down today. We're going to do some comparisons between behaviors in ARMY and behaviors in other fandoms. And we're going to see what overlaps, what doesn't, even though all of it really overlaps. The only thing that's really unique to ARMY is how it does so much of the funding and streaming organizing, but a lot of those in general are unique to K-pop as a fandom type. already. So even then, BTS ARMY is not 100% unique because K-pop at large shares a lot of the same traits as ARMY. Even if those things might have come from ARMY, those traits are shared with other fandoms. So ARMY cannot say it's only them.
I think this is going to make some people feel sad. And I think other people listening to this are going to finally feel validated in a way that they probably didn't totally know why they were feeling unvalidated. So let's do it.
Yeah. So we're just going to jump right into it. I would like to first say that fandom culture is large outside of K-pop. ARMY has this weird thing it does where ARMY does not see itself as a fandom. Okay? There's centering of just BTS ARMY as like a group of people. And then if you say other fandom, they think that means other K-pop fandoms. And if there's anything beyond that, then it's just antis or people outside of the immediate K-pop space. They don't conceive like other quote unquote other fandoms like anime or games or like books or TV shows. Like they don't conceive any of that.
Right. It's almost like all those folks are just GP to them. They're just the general public. They don't matter.
Yeah. Which is so interesting because it's like in a lot of other fandom spaces, like this is what I experienced a lot on Tumblr when I was really active there. It's all these multi-fandom, cross-fandom spaces. There's actually a joke on Tumblr about how we all eventually become K-pop stans. Because if you've been mutuals with someone on Tumblr long enough, there will be a point in time where they become a K-pop stan. I'm just saying. Like, the amount of people I used to be friends with, like, back in the day, who are now K-pop people is baffling. It's like, I'm now a K-pop person. I have now become the joke that we've all joked about.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because in like spaces like Tumblr and even like LiveJournal, even though LiveJournal has like the separate communities, people are very openly multi-fandom. They're into different things and they share those different things with you, even if you're from a different fandom. So it's strange how ARMY doesn't accept that. I think at a certain point, ARMY was like that. But at a certain point, it diverged off from that and became its own entity.
At least in my time in the fandom, it feels like things have become more extreme. I think we're at like some sort of like peak extremeness right now with everything that's going on with the boycotters versus the anti-boycotters and on all this nonsense. But I think that extremism in gatekeeping and streamlining of the fandom has really reached some kind of peak here.
Yeah, it definitely has. I know you were reading about the supernatural fandom in one of your
Yeah.
books. Do you want to talk about that?
I'll preface this by saying, so I've been doing a lot of reading. So there's a ton of scholarship out there on fandom. A lot of the fandom scholarship has focused on online communities, but it's been more of a focus on that are around like books or TV shows and movies, a little bit around like comics and stuff. But and then obviously Star Wars and Star Trek kind of fall in there too. There's books on that. Anyway, so I've been working my way through a bunch of fandom books and scholarship about fandom. One of the ones I recently finished was on the supernatural fandom. And I'll drop a link to the citation for that in the description. So in this book, it's interesting because it was published in 2013. So all of it was written before the BTS ARMY fandom even existed. And interesting because a lot of the things they say in there are things I've seen echoed in ARMY spaces, and there's a lot of connections to be made there. But one of the things, speaking of this multiple fandom, the kind of acceptance of multiple fandoms in the space. In this book, they talk a lot about the, what's it called, the super Wholock, the Sherlock Holmes, Supernatural, and Doctor Who fandoms all converging into this larger cross fandom space where they do a lot of crossed text edits, and there's like a lot of kind of mashing of those three the content from those three places together, and so you get all this like really fun, especially on Tumblr, a bunch of fun stuff. Anyway, so it's interesting to see this openness to other fandoms and other fandomness and kind of the bringing together of fandoms in a way that we certainly don't see on ARMY at all.
Yeah, ARMY very much tries to be like its own secluded space, which I think is really harmful in a lot of ways because it pushes out, I think, the inherent message of BTS about like community building and like actually bringing people together with music. And I think here's the thing, there's like justification for that, obviously, right? Historically, ARMY has been bullied by a lot of different people, and forgiveness is not within a lot of people for that. But I think as we've grown, we have not like grown out and extended outward into the world. We have more created more gatekeeping.
Right. And I think it's interesting to see at least what I've been seeing in terms of the patterns of behavior. It's interesting to see post 2020 ARMY kind of inherit that baggage. They're like inheriting it and taking on that baggage of, oh, this is what it used to be like. This is why we're spiteful. This is why we are never going to forgive. Like all of that rhetoric and discourse, like just gets passed on to these newer ARMY. And so instead of bringing in fresh people and having this kind of fresh, diverse perspective, we're just seeing a lot more bitter people who weren't even here for the original events, which has been interesting, like narrative turn, but that's aside.
Or people who, it's like the people who still echo the sentiment that we can't trust other K-pop fandoms. I remember when Army for Palestine first started organizing and they reached out to other fandoms. And people were like, why are you doing that? We don't talk to other fandoms, right? And I'm like, that is such a BTS ARMY thing to think, that you cannot extend your hand out, especially with something that's so fundamentally, we all can agree that genocide is bad, right? And just the way that people took that and then were like, oh, we don't trust Army for Palestine because they're talking with other fandoms. I'm like, what?
And it like went beyond that because there was the whole conspiracy theory of, oh, this is Break Wings 2.0. Oh, these are actually other people from other fandoms coming in and infiltrating us. Though claiming that for those of us who have been here for years, right? And it's just interesting to see that get passed on. And then all the ARMY who weren't here for Break Wings 1.0, they're going, oh, people talking about this is your chance to like experience that and be a part of this history and like jumping on that weird bandwagon. And then other people going, why would you want to relive that? That was awful. Like it was a terrible time. Why would you want to have that? And kind of those kinds of discussions happening when all of this is actually technically all within ARMY. There was no infiltration of other. It's just like a really weird conspiracy level stuff going on to try to make it seem like ARMY is more coherent than it actually is.
Yeah, with the Break Wings 2.0 thing, very much that's an example of how a lot of chart armies, funder, streamers, buyers, voters, etc., they have come together to create rhetoric that benefits themselves, right? Like, keep talking about the pro BTS versus pro themselves thing that's going on with a lot of anti-boycotters right now. And very much they're pro wanting to get higher numbers of charts, wanting to get more sales, wanting to get better position numbers on Billboard Hot 100, et cetera, et cetera. And they do all of that with purposely malicious rhetoric, so that way they can manipulate people into doing things, right? Because I remember I got flamed on Twitter for saying this, but there are a lot of instances where funder and charting armies, they put information on the TL and they coordinated posting the information, so that way they could make people get angry, and then that way they can make people angry stream and get higher numbers. When really, why did they ever result to that? And they resulted to that because they keep on creating these barriers and these, like, in order to be an army, you have to do this XYZ thing. By creating those things, they make people feel obligated emotionally to do a lot of labor.
Yeah, it's wild, like the manipulations that happen in these spaces, but go on.
Yeah, and like with other large international fandoms, gatekeeping in a lot of capacities, but not as much as in BTS ARMY, right? BTS ARMY, they could have the I'm not like other girls when it comes to gatekeeping. Okay? Because gatekeeping is so prevalent within the space.
Yeah, we'll give them that. They can have that one.
Yeah, that's the best one. Go ahead, keep it. I don't care. But a really good example to draw here is with anime fandoms, right? Anime fandoms are so prevalent within online spaces, right? You'll see a guy talking about football with a Goku profile picture. The prevalence of anime fandoms and the way anime fandoms have expanded on the internet is so vast, right? And anime fandoms themselves, of course, people are going to be gatekeepy, right? Like we're seeing, for example, like Megan Thee Stallion right now. Megan Thee Stallion is coming out with new music. She's going to have a new album released soon. And a lot of people who are anime fans, they're saying she's a fake fan, basically, because they're trying to like be gatekeepy. There's also misogynoir happening here with how Megan Thee Stallion is a black woman and how people are so hateful and bigoted towards black women. But there's also a conversation here with how anime fandoms are trying to gatekeep. But the gatekeeping that is happening by anime fans is minuscule compared to ARMY. They're like, she doesn't read the manga and she doesn't know these obscure animes. And it's, yes, she does. She does read manga. She does. And she literally has cosplayed anime characters for years now. It's not like some new thing of her talking about anime or she just recently got into it. She's been into anime. It's so interesting because anime fandoms also have gatekeeping, but simultaneously are much more open than BTS ARMY is. And I very much is a parallel between BTS ARMY and then anime fandoms. By the way, I shouldn't really monolithicize anime fandoms at large, but the way anime fandoms work, where you don't just watch one anime, you only like that one anime, but still you watch a variety of anime, and that makes you in the anime sphere. In K-pop, there was less gatekeeping and also like actual company sanctioned animosity towards each other in fandoms. K-pop would look more like anime if there was less competition. Because even in anime itself, a lot of people don't only like one anime. They might have one anime that's like their main fandom, but they like multiple things. They watch multiple things. They engage with multiple spaces. ARMY very much is super gatekeepy and has all these walls up, while anime has, it does have gatekeeping, but the capacity and the difference in it is so stark. What do you think about that, Kate?
I think it's super interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that supposedly one of ARMY's main jobs is to support BTS. And one would think, and the way that we as a fandom have moved in the past has been to get the word out about BTS, right? And I think that it's interesting kind of taking this extreme gatekeeping turn when the idea would be to grow the fandom. We want more people to hear BTS. We want more people to like BTS and listen to BTS. And so I think that there's this kind of interesting, it matters to the fandom that BTS have listeners. And so I think that it's interesting to take this like really toxic gatekeepy stance when you would think the idea would be to like have more people hear.
Yeah, I think as the years have gone by, it's not like ARMY at large, but like a certain smaller group of ARMY have created a list of qualifications to be an ARMY. And then that has become widespread. You have to stream, you have to buy, you have to do XYZ thing. You have to do XYZ thing in this certain way, even though the certain way you're supposed to do it is constantly changing because the charts are constantly changing and the music industry is constantly changing. There's so many parameters being created and then this keep getting spread because those gatekeepy people are, admittedly, they do hold a lot of power in the back end, like the behind the scenes of BTS ARMY. Haha, the BTS of BTS ARMY. But in the behind the scenes spaces, there's a lot of people making decisions about things and then spreading that to the fandom at large that I think people don't realize. I'm not going to really talk about it because I've already got my ass beat about that, but very much there's things happening in the back end that affect the fandom at large. And I think a lot of the problems we have is like people doing stuff in the back end and then affecting the fandom at large through those things.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting kind of elitism to it. If you're on in the in crowd, I don't know, other fandoms have big name fans and stuff like that, where we have this elite group of people that are working in the shadows to move and shape the fandom. And again, it goes back to that manipulation and then the reality that this is like a much smaller group of people than you might think, because it's like a very tight group of people making these calls. And then they're just using their gigantic ass platforms to move and shape things because they've got all these people that are following them. And I think that research perspective is fascinating, but from a community member perspective, especially as someone who's now on the outs with these elite group of people, does not make a good community experience.
With the back end, a lot of people are doing things there that if it were shown on the TL, people would not accept. And there's a lot of manipulative behaviors that I have been deeply there's a reason why I left a lot of those spaces. It's like deeply uncomfortable to see like how much of Army Twitter is like dictated by these people. And of course, like every little voice matters, but these people are like doing even this is gonna be, should I share this? There are some people who have been run off of Army Twitter publicly facing, but they are still very much involved in Army Twitter on the back end.
I have no idea who you're talking about. None
Yeah, I have no idea. There's a lot of people who still hold power within spaces, even if you didn't like them, or they rebrand, right? It's so easy for people to do that because a lot of their large followings don't care. Anyway, let's bring it back to the larger fandom conversation here. One thing I really want to talk about today is like how there are a lot of conversations that are happening in larger fandom culture that are reflections of things happening in BTS ARMY. But BTS ARMY itself is not participating in that larger fandom conversation, which is so interesting because I retweet a lot of stuff from just general fandom culture accounts. These people are called like meta essayists, or it's like a lot of like academics, like journalists, or people involved in writing, or people who are like old fans. If you're a fandom old, that's a term we're using now, which is the worst. It's like me calling myself a fandom old when I'm like 20. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm a fandom old because I understand what fandom was like before the dark days. But here we are now. And for example, one very large fandom conversation happening right now is around purity culture, and specifically how purity culture is affecting conventions. A lot of fan artists, artist allies are experiencing harassment from people who are coming up and like complaining about what they draw and like the content they're engaging in, which is like a whole thing where if you're an adult and everyone's consenting, fictional characters don't have to consent, by the way, because they're a fictional character. But if you want to draw something sexy or weird, that is all you, boo. More power to you, okay? I might think it's weird and gross, and I'm not going to look at it. But if you want to do it, that's all you, right? Because artist alleys do have 18 plus areas, and you can sell 18 plus work, right? In those areas. It's strange. The purity culture conversation, this has been like a years long conversation, by the way, in larger fandom spaces. But the conversation happening now is like so prevalent and would be very easily understood by BTS ARMY.
The BTS, we have these conversations all the time. We just are very insulated about it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And we have an added layer to it too, because we write real person fan fiction. I say we as if everyone is.
Isn't everyone? Is that not? Do we not?
No. Oh, this is hot. This is hot tea. This is steaming hot tea, Kate. But there's the amount of people who write fanfiction on ARMY Twitter that don't admit it to the TL is incredible. There's so many people. Mm-hmm. You may think even the people who criticize fanfiction or criticize fandom or NSFW content, they're writing NSFW fanfiction on the side.
I believe it.
They just have the cognitive dissonance to think that what they're writing is somehow not the same. But it's the same thing. I'm like, no matter if you write, we're going to have a fan fiction episode in the future, so I'll be able to talk about things more explicitly there.
Yeah, this is a preview. We're gonna unpack fan fiction in a whole episode.
But even if you write like something very vanilla versus something extremely dark, if it's NSFW, you're all the same umbrella. You all are. There is no gauge or scale that somehow makes one thing better than the other. You all are doing the same thing. That is the thing.
True story. True.
It's so interesting because then there's also people who are like, oh, I write BTS fanfiction, but I don't write W stuff. I only write soft, nice things. And I'm like, you're still writing fanfiction.
I love the people who are like, I don't write fan fiction because they don't publish on AO3. But then they're in there on their Twitter accounts writing all these, talking about their dreams or talking about, oh, what if? And that's all fan fiction, yo. It's all fan fiction.
A Twitter AU is fan fiction.
Yeah. If it's not a true story, it's something you made up about BTS, it is fan fiction.
Yeah. Like you going on your Twitter account and going, what if Namjoon and Yoongi owned a coffee shop together and they had a ton of cats? That's fan fiction. You've written fan fiction.
You've written fan fiction.
Congratulations. Literally same brain cell. But yeah, like fandom culture is so deeply embedded in ARMY, and then ARMY denies that. And I'm like, ugh, girl, that's gross.
Honestly, maybe one of the weirdest things for me about being in this fandom has been that dissonance between the purity culture police on the timeline and then the things I read on AO3. And I'm just like, or even the things, if you go to the fan fiction side of ARMY Twitter, like there, if you unlock that side of ARMY Twitter, it is a whole nother realm of things happening over there that like on the like kind of the regular quote unquote regular ARMY timeline is just 9 day. It's 9 day over there.
Yeah, it's like how I talked about the My Hero Academia shipping versus non-shipping space. It's the same fandom, but it's vastly different spaces, which is great because we're also going to talk about how sometimes ageism is different in different fandom spaces. Sorry, that transition was pretty poor, but I really want to talk about ageism when it comes to fandom spaces as well, because I am someone who's been in fandom spaces for a long time, and I come from a long legacy of multi-generational fandom spaces. Okay? One of my fandom friend groups was like me, like 14, with a bunch of older teens, 20-something years old. And then we had this one lady who she was like 50, and she talked about anime, and she was living her best life, and she shared great recipes too. I've been involved in a lot of fandom spaces with a lot of people from a lot of different ages and a lot of different walks of life and experiences. And that's really important to me, which is why ageism is so weird, right? We have the larger fandom conversation around ageism, and like other fandoms are also, ARMY is also having this conversation around ageism, but the way other fandoms talk about it is a little more distinct from BTS ARMY, where it's like the people who say, oh, I can't believe this fanfiction was written by a 30-year-old. Who do you think has the skills to write a good fanfic like that? Marinating on that real quick. Yeah. Anyway, but multi-generational fandom spaces are really important for the fandom. But BTS ARMY, when they have these conversations, it very much feels like there's multiple things going on here, right? So in K-pop spaces, a lot of the idols are really young, right? I don't want to judge people for what they like and what they're involved in, right? But sometimes a lot of people may raise eyebrows if you are a 40-year-old person who likes a 15-year-old K-pop idol.
Yeah, it's something to reflect on a little bit.
Yeah, but then also there's nothing wrong with that, right? In a lot of instances.
Yeah, no, not inherently. Just getting weird about it.
It's like people themselves who get weird about it, right? Just think like anime fandoms, right? There's people who are like 50 who like My Hero Academia, and that's a bunch of 15-year-old characters running around doing things. But that doesn't mean the messages from that show or from the music from that K-pop group or just like good tunes can't resonate with someone of that age. It's interesting to see how people engage with that ageism in K-pop fandom spaces, because very much I feel like with BTS ARMY, we're seeing like there's so much vitriol against older people, but then at the same time we see a extreme backlash from older people in the fandom. We're seeing that now, where a lot of older people in the fandom hold a lot of Twitter clout, right? and then use that to once again create all the malicious narratives and spread all the malicious narratives while simultaneously engaging with a lot of just strange behaviors. Where, like, in our fandom, in response to ageism, a lot of these older women become very much I'm an older Nuna who likes NSFW stuff, and they talk about sexual stuff very explicitly on the TL. And we see that in response to the vitriol from ageism, we're seeing an extreme response from a lot of older individuals.
Yeah, so I obviously have my own personal feelings about how I choose to move and how I choose to put myself out on the timeline, but I feel like there's a diversity of people out in the universe and everybody likes their own things and is going to like approach this in their own way. I do think that I've seen, so what I'll say is what I from my own explorations and trying to understand our community spaces. I do know that a lot of the more extreme folks, which is ironic given the blow up in the last week about blocking BTS accounts. But anyway, the more extreme folks who do that kind of more extreme tweeting about BTS and kind of the Nuna NSFW stuff, they tend to have all the BTS accounts blocked so that they don't actually see what they're tweeting about. They do have some gatekeeping of their own that they do so that it's not, it's not easy necessarily to fall in and see these accounts. And so I think that is actually a nice ethical practice that they engage in, which is cool. But anyway, so I think there's room for all of these people. I just think that we do tend to, because it's Twitter and the way this community in particular works, we do tend to see the extremes more than we see the middle ground. And I think there's a lot more happening in the middle ground that just doesn't really get talked about because the talk is happening in other spaces like group chats and Discord and on AO3 and like these other places where things are a little less public and a little bit more a more controlled environment where there is a little bit more gatekeeping, or at least the thing with the going onto AO3, for example, yes, it's public for the most part, but there are tags and there are ways to like consent to these things. I think that when they're like super public on the timeline, anyone can access, it gets a little bit weird because I have and could run into content that I don't consent to seeing. And so there's things there that I have feelings about from an ethical standpoint, but everybody should, you do you, but it is interesting that we get these kind of blow ups over this stuff. We've seen lots of times when the one time that NSFW account posted on Weverse, and that was super wild. Like, why would you do that? And so there was drama around that, right? But the extremism of the purity movement is also super uncomfortable to me in the same way that the extreme the other way is uncomfortable.
I think just circling around the point you made earlier about how extremism is its peak in army Twitter right now.
It really is. And I think that's the platform's fault. The platform has always liked the drama, but with the way the platform is now very broken, it like loves the drama. And so we really are seeing just more extremism. But I think we're also inflicting that on ourselves in the way people are moving right now with blocking and all this canceling and all the harassment and all the reporting, all these accounts getting taken down. They're creating echo chambers and it's just super juicing the extremism, right? It's creating these like pockets of just like really echoey vitriol. And so here we are.
And it's unfortunate. We also want to talk about one more case of extremism in fandom. We're doing this, Kate. Let's unpack everything, right? Okay, so in fandom culture at large, whiteness is a huge issue, right? If you read a lot of the readings, the major readings about fandom and published in the past 20 years, a lot of it is by white people, right?
Sure is. Yep.
A lot of whiteness controls the conversation that happens in fandom spaces. That is also true in BTS ARMY.
Yes. And I'll say that it's not necessarily that individual accounts are being held or owned by white people, but the conversation is still centralized around white facing norms and culture and values and accounts that are super large, even if they are not a white person behind them, often get mistaken as white people because they are acting like white people in order to pander to that large audience. There's a lot to unpack there in terms of what that means, but that's what we're seeing even in ARMY spaces.
Yeah, definitely. When we see in larger fandom culture as well, this conversational whiteness has always been like a point of issue and a point of discussion. Because I remember like in 2017, 2018, I was having these conversations as well when I wasn't even in ARMY, when we talk a lot about how like in white fandom spaces, which is a majority of fandom spaces are white facing, in these spaces, a lot of people of color cannot exist, right? There's a reason why when you read a lot of Your Name fan fiction, assumingly, most of the time, it is assumed that the YN character is white. And that those experiences the YN character is having is universal. What do you think about that, Kate?
In my own reading of fan fiction across different spaces, but there are a lot of YN, like reader insert fanfics in the BTS space where it's white girl goes to Korea, gets stuck in Korea, is in Korea for a job. But that is all very, there's assumption there that this is a white girl who speaks English, who maybe learned Korean in college. There's the storylines are the same over and over again. And so it's interesting seeing that this is like a true thing across other fandoms as well. And I've done some scholarly readings around this, around the fact that this is a very prevalent issue. And we see this in a lot of media at large, the whitewashing that happens in just the general media that gets produced. And so it makes sense that this is also a thing that's happening in these spaces. Although it is interesting, especially in fan fiction, but we could see this in other places. It's interesting that even when we have a fandom for something that is non-white, like a fandom around BTS, for example, the prevalent kind of moves and discourse are still very white centric. And so that's an interesting tension, I think, that especially I think for ARMY, it's and especially like an international ARMY problem, right?
Yeah, we see like a performance of whiteness within the fandom with things like cishet normativity. We're even suggesting any amount of queerness around BTS is taken completely. Ooh,
Ooh,
yeah,
you went there.
I did. I had to, right? If you even suggest something's a little queer over there, then by the way, I am a queer person, so I'm going to say the word queer. I'm sorry. I apologize if anyone is. My elders are upset with me for saying that, but I'm going to say the word queer. That's what's going to happen. But very much like even suggesting it around BTS, you get dog pile on ARMY Twitter. They'll
Yeah,
hate you.
yeah, they will. It's wild out there on those streets. I've seen the bloodbath. It's not pretty.
Or even like suggesting like something cute about how like Namjoon and Jungkook interact and how Jungkook did have a crush on Namjoon when he first joined BTS. I feel like phrasing it that way is not
canon.
wrong.
Yeah, this is canon at this point, right?
Yeah. Phrasing how he likes Namjoon as a crush is not a bad thing. It's not we're suggesting something nefarious is going on. It's just, oh, he like had a crush on him and that's why he joined BTS, right? It's not people going, oh, something gross is happening here or like that, right? So it's so interesting because like cishet normativity is very much a performance of whiteness. We have a whole we could talk about colonization here. Do you want
Well, I
to?
was gonna be like, I think the TLDR of this actual episode is let's decolonize ARMY, but okay, go on.
No, actually, we should decolonize ARMY because there's also in this conversation about performance of whiteness is the erasure of BTS's Korean culture, right? We talked about that a couple episodes back.
Yeah.
And BTS have always been proud of their Korean identities and proud of being Korean. And they've also Multiple members have talked about reunification as well with North and South Korea. They're proud of being Korean, and inherently they are Korean. They do not want to leave Korea in any aspect. But the erasure of BTS's Korean culture by large parts of the fandom is once again like a performance of whiteness, even in a fandom where our main interest isn't white people. Kate, I know you recently read a book about Jane Austen. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'm reading another fandom book right now, Jane Austen fandom, which is really cool because I didn't, again, something I've always loved, but didn't realize there was a whole fandom for that I could have been a community member of. Anyway, not the point here. Yeah, no, so there was an interesting conversation in this book, and again, I can drop the citation in the description for you all. But in this book, they're talking about how Jane Austen, the author herself, never discussed the race of any of her characters. And people often have this assumption of whiteness around Jane Austen characters because of the consumption of media renditions of Jane Austen's books. And so we see like a lot of the remakes, the movies, and then the series and stuff that we've seen, all it's just like all white casts, right? It's just like white people everywhere. And so then there's this kind of assumption, of course, these characters are white. And what the authors in this book were actually arguing is if you think back to England in the late 1700s, early 1800s, the actual racial makeup of England was actually much more diverse than you might think because of colonization. The British Empire went out and brought people back to England who were a diverse set of races. And we just didn't have at the time, because the kind of the idea of capturing racial information and like the actual demographics weren't really a thing. They just weren't recorded. It wasn't discussed in the same way that it is today, where we're like very fine grained about what race and ethnicity mean. So there's just not, we don't have the picture of what Jane Austen's England might have looked like. And so it's very possible that these characters were more racially diverse than we imagine them to be because of the actual reality of England at the time. That got me really thinking about, oh, it's really interesting that this idea of whitewashing something and the assumption of whiteness is very much a today issue, a modern thing, not something that was created 200 years ago. It's a very much an us now problem that we need to untangle.
And we're trying to untangle that right now.
Woo!
Right now. Exactly. In addition to like talking about all of these larger fandom issues, I wanted to touch a point on this one thing that I share a lot. So this is a Tumblr post that I share quite often. It's by this Tumblr account called That's Nice But I'm Married, which is such a funny username, by the way. Such a funny username. And in this Tumblr post, they talk about this concept of a Supreme Court, right? In the post, they say, being in a long-term fandom really makes me wish we had fandom Supreme Courts. Just so that every time the same stupid discourse rears its ugly head for the umpteenth time in 10 years, we can just be like, actually, this argument was settled in the 2006 Supreme Court ruling in the case of Angel Potter versus XS Goff 1 C Rose XX. So everyone can shut up about it now. Imagine the wank reduction. And with that,
I love that so much.
actually, and it's very much like this fandom Supreme Court idea. It goes to show larger fandom culture. If we expand from just ARMY into just larger fandom culture, very much a lot of the problems ARMY has have been solved or have already happened.
Turns out we're not actually unique special butterflies after all.
Yeah. And it's almost like we can learn from other fandom spaces to improve our own.
What a thought. Learning from history, I don't know about that.
I don't know about that. How are we going to decolonize the world? We should just keep going forward. I think we're fine.
Yeah. Steamroll that right ahead. No looking back.
Actually, to kind of transition back to the comparisons that we were doing earlier as well between BTS ARMY and other fandoms, something really prevalent among all fandoms right now is the abuse of community notes. Do you want to talk about that, Kate?
Oh yeah, this has been something we unlocked, a new pet peeve of Kate's, where she doesn't like it when people subvert our safety systems, for example, to use in their weird fandom trolling behavior. Turns out, yeah, with all the army using the community notes on Twitter to subvert the conversation. And it turns out this is not a unique to army thing. Go figure.
But with that conversation of community notes, we can transition into like other conversations as well around like some things to BTS ARMY that are actually unique to BTS ARMY. Because there are a lot of things that the fandom does very much that are uniquely theirs. We could start with talking about funding. Woo! Do you want to start us off, Kate? You had some strong feelings.
We started this whole episode talking about this a little bit, but just the ways that army move that to me seem very weird for fandom to do. And so there's the manipulation and there's the push for streaming and funding and buying and this inherent need to top charts. And my strong feelings come from a place of, is this really what we should be doing as a fandom? Is this really like the best way to, in quotes, support BTS? And this is something we've been spiraling around for weeks now about thinking about throwing all this money at BTS and at their music, really like the best use of our time and energy, and especially like all the time spent attacking people for not doing those things or being especially vitriolic about it or super manipulative and pushing all this guilt onto people on the timeline, which is something that's been happening ever since I've been in the fandom. So I'm assuming it's a historic trend of sorts. Anyway, I have lots of swirling feelings. Some of them I'm still processing around what are we doing here as a fandom and why are we moving the way we move sometimes? And a part of this, and maybe this is partly why I was excited about this episode in particular, is because I feel like one of the things that is uniquely ARMY and unique to ARMY as a fandom is they're not realizing they're in a fandom and not realizing we are a fandom and don't move like a fandom should. And it's really detrimental to us as a whole community because some of us are here and trying to move like a fandom and the rest are like, oh no, don't do that. And so wait, that's normal fandom behavior. Why are we being chastised for this? Anyway, that was a lot to unpack, but there you go.
Yeah, we can definitely start unpacking though. There are multiple normal fandom things that people in ARMY who don't recognize this as a fandom don't see it as a normal thing, right? Because people in ARMY think that streaming and voting and funding and buying to the extreme that they have taken it is what this space is supposed to be. When pre 2020, I want to say, I think it was much more accepted to do normal fandom things like transformative works, right? Fan
Right.
fiction, fan art, just making NSFW content is normal. I'm sorry, team, but one of the most read fanfics on AO3 for BTS is literally a fanfic that has multiple torture scenes, multiple sex scenes, and is also has like drug use in it.
Be more than one of the top read fanfics though, like that could actually, what you just described covers
Yeah.
multiple top read. And when we say top read, we mean by millions of reads.
Yeah,
Millions.
millions of people have read these. And having NSFW content in fandoms is normal. Having transformative works in fandoms is normal. And all those things are good for fandoms because they make you engage with the fandom in a different way. So you're not always only engaging with the main material. You're engaging transformatively with things, right? You're having fun with things. And I feel like the most obvious point for me when I really felt it was when that one fan artist who spoke up as being pro boycott and they got their fan art stolen and people trying to make profit off of their fan art. And just seeing that, the decimation of, I feel like something that is sacred, which is you don't F around with someone else's work, right?
Right.
Nothing is sacred anymore.
No, truly, that was one of the moments I'm like, oh, this community has lost it. The plot is gone. We are not a community fandom space anymore. We are cesspool. We are something else entirely. But yeah, that was one of those moments like, oh, okay. We're just like basically taking like kind of the central rules of fandom behavior and we're breaking them all. And by when I say we, I mean the larger community as one might view it from the outside, not we as in our smaller collective, but as a larger community, we are breaking all the rules because we're like, yeah, we're stealing fan art and not just stealing it, but they were like reporting her and all of these things, right? It's just like breaking all the rules because then we're talking about we're going and spreading our weird like our and I said weird, but that's like an affectionate term, like our weird fandomness, like under GP posts and being like just breaking all the rules, just broken, and just we've lost the plot entirely as a community.
Yeah, truly nothing is sacred anymore. Respecting other people's work is not sacred. Respecting each other is not sacred. I think the moment Army Twitter tried to normalize doxing too, and people were making fun of me in my quote retweets for saying to not normalize doxing and giving like a heed warning about it, that we've truly, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like my multiple fandom experiences have taught me that doxing is not the answer to things, even if you think it is. If you really hate someone, do you think threatening their safety is going to make the space safer?
This is an excellent question because this is something I've also been like circling around and trying to think about. The second they started breaking safety protocols and breaking these rules around safety in general is okay, that's great that you've basically turned into your worst enemy now, but you're not making this fandom safer for anyone. Now that these rules are broken, what's going to stop other people from coming in and doing the same thing to you? It's just, it doesn't make sense to me. None of this is good people, human behavior. And the way big accounts are, if they're not engaging it in it themselves, they're still condoning it. They're still saying, oh, I don't want to send hate to so-and-so's way, but here's so-and-so's at. Go find them. It's just like this very weird condoning of this super toxic behavior that at one point in time we all agreed was not okay. And so it's been really interesting to see the kind of unraveling of the community.
Yeah, the community can actually never be the same since we have condoned this, right? I don't think we as individuals have, but the space at large has condoned this, right? Because I talk a lot about doxing and how just terrible it is as an internet thing. Also, there's a whole conversation around internet privacy and actual being able to find information. I can find where someone lives so easily if I have their full name. It's so easy nowadays because the internet makes it easy. And I think people don't realize that. And with doxing, right? There is so much. Like when you dox someone, you are not putting only their safety at risk, you're putting the safety of everyone around them at risk as well, right? Because if someone lives in an apartment complex, right, they can get swatted, right? And not even if they live in an apartment complex, they can get swatted if they live in a house as well. And swatting is a violent use of police force that actively harms communities, right?
It's so scary. I cannot express enough how scary it is, especially in the United States where the police are more likely to just instinctually murder a person of color rather than figure out what's going on in a house or whatever. It's scary. And that is where doxing leads. I don't care if that's not what your intent was. That is where it leads, is to people getting murdered. That is such a hard line for me that and I don't think people are thinking this through. They're not seeing it through to the end point where people die. And it's wild to me that they aren't thinking about that.
Yeah. And a lot of times people think, oh, but I want them to die, right? Really childish you to think, by the way. If you think that about anyone, I'm sorry. Extremely childish. A lot of times you might think like of that one person, you're centering so much on that one person and you're honing in on that, but you don't realize that other people around them are affected by that, right? They're family members, right? What if they have like a family member in the house or like a friend in the house who also gets swatted and gets harmed? What about that, right? The police, when they go to the house, they're not just going to be like, oh, we're only going to target this one person this person hates, right? They're just going to target anyone.
Right. Yeah.
Because what happens often too is like when the person calls to get the person they hate swatted, they're making up a scenario on the phone of something that's happening. Something that I've heard Twitch streamers talk about pretty often is people will say that basically that there's someone in the house being harmed and the person on the phone is the person harming, right? They act like they're the person on the phone and that they're basically the person who's going to hurt someone. And they're like, I'm getting all these threats. I'm going to shoot this person. And you have to come and like, if you want to stop me, you have to do this or like that. And then the police don't know what's going on because they think they're listening to the actual perpetrator. And it's like this fake scenario and it actually kills people. There are documented cases in America of in the past 5 years of people getting killed from swatting. And people don't take it seriously enough. I generally don't think so. Like, even if it's not swatting, a lot of people commit suicide after they get doxxed, which you might want. But also, when someone commits suicide, it doesn't only affect them, that affects all the people around them.
Right.
So there are ways to do retribution and to enact justice in online spaces that do not involve doxing. But in order to explore those options, and in order for those options to be better, this is why I advocate for deepfake regulation law. Because I used to be an angry child on the internet who did think that doxing would fix all the issues in the world, but it doesn't. What actually fixes the issues in the world is boring legislation advocacy, to have better laws to actually help people. Like all of the cyberbullying laws, all of the laws around online trolling and hate and being able to report those things and doxing as a crime, getting that to have harsher consequences, all of that is legislation advocacy from a lot of different groups of people. And don't dox people. Moral of story.
Yeah. It's sad that one even has to say that out loud, but here we
It
are.
is really sad.
Not as serious as doxing, but I have had happen to me. I've had people screenshot private conversations and post them on the public timeline to try to make some kind of argument about how I'm a terrible person. And I've had my privacy breached in a lot of different ways in Army Twitter, which, like, in and of itself is super violating. If you haven't had that happen to you, it's hard to describe what it feels like when it does happen to you, right? It makes you feel really vulnerable. It's potentially scary because, okay, if they did this, then what other things might they escalate and do? And I just recently had my name come up in that secret Discord channel where they were targeting people. And it's like, one of the things that I will say for me personally that this has really brought up is the fact that I am not private. Like, you can find my name and address and place of work very easily because I am a publicly employed person. I work for a public institution. Everything about me is public. And so when people start targeting me in that way, I'm not like super worried about myself, but I have a responsibility not just to me, but I have a family with little kids, and I would like my kids to not be exposed to any of this garbage. And I have an entire lab full of students that I feel very responsible for, right? So I worry a lot about those things when this sort of stuff comes up. But again, I keep barreling forward because what else are you going to do? This is the point where I'm like, yes, this is very bad, and we shouldn't be exposing people's privacy without their consent. And if we want to have these kinds of arguments and seek justice and revenge, there are other ways to do it that are more productive than just destroying someone's life, because that does not a productive conversation make. Anyway, just my 2 cents. Love
Just
fandom.
2 cents.
Love it here.
Yeah. There's a reason every revenge story ends with the character feeling hollow at the end. Because
Yeah.
even if they get revenge, that doesn't fix the problem inherently. So fix problems.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
And with that, we come to a close with this episode. It's been over an hour. What's your thoughts, Kate?
Final thoughts. Decolonize the community. Let's do it. Let's just decolonize the whole world. Let's go for it. Start with your own spaces. That's a great place to start. If you are one of the people who didn't realize you are part of a larger fandom universe, this is your chance to go explore that and discover that there are other fandom spaces out there, that fandom is a whole cultural thing beyond just what ARMY does. I think that like it's really exciting and there's a lot to learn there. And so I've been having a lot of fun learning these things. It's like all this stuff I was a part of for years and years, and I just didn't have names for what I was doing. And I didn't have the community aspects of it because a lot of the stuff I did was not inclusive. I was into Star Trek and Dungeons and Dragons and Lord of the Rings, and these were all very male dominated spaces. So I never felt safe to be in them. I was doing this all by myself in my lonesome, but I didn't realize it was a whole thing I could have been participating in. This was also pre-internet things. Anyway, but yeah, but discovering that there's these larger spaces you can be in is really exciting. But again, I think the real takeaway from this discussion has been each of us has the power to shape what our community looks like because we are members of that community, and each of us has the ability to push back and negotiate what our own norms and guidelines and the ways we behave can be. And we don't have to just follow large or loud accounts, right? We can make our own decisions and shape what's important to us. And I think that knowing that and me saying, okay, I'm empowering you to go decolonize your own spaces, I'm hoping that gives you the extra push you need to go do those things. Yeah.
Yay! And I would just like to say as well, as we're talking about this, larger fandom culture, learning from other fandoms and learning from like fandom culture, just like the blanket of it, helps BTS ARMY in the long run. Because there's a lot of things we just don't have words for, or we don't understand completely as a fandom that other people have already figured out. So it's good to reach out and to learn from those different spaces so that way we can improve our own space. Because very much I feel like our space for a while has been stuck. I think really post 2020. I think the fandom just grew really large really quickly, and a lot of people didn't know how to deal with that. And what manifested was a lot of the extremes of the fandom coming to fruition and taking helm. But now it's time to take it back, I say. It's time to take back our fandom, take back our power, and create a space that we actually love and that can care for each other. Because I want to live in a safe and happy space. And I think in order to create that, we're going to have to work together.
I love this plan. Let's do it.
Yay!
Yay.
Anyway, that is it. Thank you all so much for watching, or so much for listening. This has been a long episode where we talked about a lot of different topics, but a lot of it's previews for future episodes as well. So stay tuned, take care, and as always, I don't know, remember, take care. I don't know, eat, go drink some water, have a good day. That's all I got.
The
Bye.
sun. Go see the sun.
Yeah, go see the sun. Bye.
Bye.